And John, I don't know if Emily said, but I have to leave a little early today at around 5.
She did mention that to me.
Okay.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you.
Thanks.
We likely could get finished by that time, but let's see what happens. All right, so it is 4:03. Let's call this meeting to order. Could I have a mover and a seconder for adoption of the minutes of our last meeting of October 14th? Pedro, thank you. Mark, thank you. Not Mark, I'm sorry, Eric, thank you. Any additions, deletions, items of concern there? Seeing none, all in favor? That would be carried. Yes, thank you very much. All right. Any declarations of pecuniary interest from anyone today on our agenda? Seeing none, let's move on to the adoption of our agenda. So could I have someone to move and second the adoption of our agenda for today's meeting? Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Jamie. Any questions, any additions, deletions? Seeing none, all in favor of approval of today's agenda? Thank you, that's carried. I'm assuming that because Andre has said nothing in either case that he doesn't have any objection. So I'm going to carry on here. All right, moving on to our agenda item number 5. Emily, I'm going to, well, actually, let me get a mover and seconder for that first. So this is the final review of our comments and notes on the urban design priority discussion after having undergone our October meeting, and we're looking to get a motion approved to send that forward to council. So could I have someone to move and second that report? Anybody? Looking for a couple of hands. Thank you, Pedro. Andre, oh, there's Mark. Okay, perfect. Okay, fantastic. So let me read the, I probably should have done that first. Let me read the motion. Whereas the Environmental Sustainability Committee has developed a list of 4 priority focus areas, including urban design, green space, built environment, and investment, with associated key actions and recommendations, which were reviewed and discussed with the city's planning department on October 14th as part of our stakeholder engagement to the city's official plan backgrounder report. Be it resolved that the Environmental Sustainability Committee recommends that these priorities be considered by the City of Sault Ste. Marie Planning Department and Council, and considered as, I just changed a little word here, but and considered as priorities in the production and enhancement of community environmental sustainability. So in our package, there's the information on specifically what would go forward formally as that report. Anybody want to comment or add anything with regards to those notes?
Donna, I shared my comments with you. Is that appropriate time to?
Andre, I'm sorry, you've shared a few comments with me in the last few days, so can you be specific? Are you referring to the, was that the vehicle comment or the parking comment, or both?
A bit of both, but is this the time? Is this the part that we talk about urban design and we talk about my comment on the electrification or the use of electric?
Well, I think what would be appropriate, Andre, is that we did go through a process in the last 2 meetings where we said what we thought was important. We talked with the planning department about that. Now these notes are coming back. They've been edited a little bit, I guess, and modified to a certain extent, right, Emily? So this is just about a formalized motion to send this forward to planning and for council's information that this is what we are considering priorities and recommending is encompassed into the official plan.
Okay. Right. It's just, yeah. So I know that the rebuttal that I received about the exclusion of parking in the official plan, or the discussion about parking reform, that it doesn't belong there. Based on the work that I've done over the past 2 weeks, including reading an 800-page book, kind of, I don't know. I think that's, I don't agree that it doesn't belong there, but anyways.
Could I actually, Andre, can hold on for 1 second. Could I get some clarity either from Emily or Travis or Tom or all of you? I don't recall reading it quite that way, but perhaps I missed something, that parking reform does not belong there. Can someone help us out here so we understand?
Sorry, Donna. I'm the Environmental Sustainability Committee Urban Design Discussion Summary does include under number 1, implement parking reform to encourage active transportation.
Okay.
Oh, so if I might, thanks, Pedro. If I might just add to this. So we've had a series of conversations. I've had one-on-one conversations with committee members, and then we came together and talked about starting in September specifically, just a robust roundtable discussion about priorities that committee members saw of value to be considered by the municipality. And then we shared this with the planning department, who then came in October and talked about ways that those priorities were being addressed already or could possibly be included. Some areas were mentioned that within the official plan specifically, that wasn't the exact place. But this summary, and in addition to that, we also had some feedback from committee members. So there was some changes made to the priorities. This is a summary that I'll be presenting to the planning department. Again, bearing in mind that these are the priorities from the committee, and also including in our report to council on what our priorities are as part of the update on where we're at with the priorities of the greenhouse gas reduction plan for year 1, and as part of the mandate of the committee to identify priorities. So it is included in there, Andre, in these priorities, although it's my understanding that in the conversation with planning, that there was other areas where that would be addressed as well.
Okay. Fair enough. Another area that we haven't mentioned, this just came up when we talk about buildings, and I know there was a Sue Today article about improving energy efficiency and reducing that. I have been researching recently for my own personal about high efficiency buildings. And I don't know if we discussed this, but the other thing I think that we need to take into account is using a lot of materials that we use in building construction now, like styrofoam and a lot of those spray foams. You definitely increase the energy efficiency, but you create another problem because we do not have a good way of disposing of that material. So in researching, looking at building what I call a green building, in other words, the materials are also green, and the production of materials are green, and also the disposal of materials is green, and the house is energy efficient. The problem is, if I want to do that in Sault Ste. Marie, because of the way the building code is written, there's a lot of things that it won't allow, like using clay, straw, or cellulose, or hemp kind of brick materials and things like that. So I was wondering if there's an opportunity here to take a step back, and when we look at buildings and look at more than just the energy efficiency of a building, but also basically the environmental impact of the construction phase, the material, and then the disposal. So basically the full life cycle. And I know that we have an opportunity there to change the way the rules are currently to facilitate moving towards a true green building.
Thanks, Andre. I'm just going to dive in here, Donna.
Thank
So
you.
this is actually something that is on my docket list. There's been quite a bit of research and reports released lately about that. And so I'd like to defer that to another meeting where I can, speak to it in more detail, but it is on my list on how we can, work with the community, the builders, et cetera, on how to bring information like that available. So I'd like to acknowledge that, but I'm not prepared to speak to it at this time.
Okay.
Sound good? I was just looking for somewhere around here is my official plan book, but I can't put my hand on it fast enough. So just wanted to see if there was any reference to that, but we'll get that on an agenda item going forward. Maybe we can manage that in December. That would be great.
Donna,
Yes,
sorry, I was just going to add,
Tom.
Donna, in the built environment, there is a point there, incorporate both low carbon and carbon storing materials in construction of new builds. And, it's just something I was going to add, like the Ontario Building Code, which is the legislation that our building department has to follow. It is being continually updated and new revisions are coming out. And I do know that certainly the topic of green buildings and green building materials and changes to the Ontario Building Code is an active discussion that's happening right now across the province.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Anything further on that before I call for the vote to approve that motion?
Yeah, I have something actually.
Go ahead, Eric.
I hate to talk about pollinator gardens again. I don't even want to talk about pollinator gardens again, but I'm going to, just because I think the point under number 2, green space, about pollinator gardens isn't quite capturing my point that I've brought up a few times. So it's worded increase pollinator gardens on city property to decrease emissions from lawn maintenance. The main point that I was making though was, yes, to try to decrease emissions from lawn maintenance, and that one way to do that might be through pollinator gardens. But the other way that isn't captured here that I tried to emphasize is exploring the use of electric lawn equipment. And actually, that was, in my opinion, the main point, more so than the pollinator gardens.
Okay. Can we get that? Is anyone with any objection to tweaking that particular point to Eric's thoughts there? I know I already said I love my electric lawnmower and I love my electric snowblower. Okay, moving on. All right, so looks like we could have a vote on this item. So all in favor of forwarding the report with those couple of slight edits? Everyone all right with that? Looking for, all right, perfect. I see nods. I don't see hands, but I see nods. So I'm going to take those as yes. All right, fantastic. Thank you very much. Emily, we're moving on to the report that you put together on the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Sustainable Communities Conference. Emily put a couple of slides together with information about the highlights from that conference, and we wanted to share those with you. She attended the conference virtually, and then we were looking for your feedback and input on what you saw there, what perhaps you didn't see there, how important some of these things are versus others, or is everything important? Just this would be the discussion part of our meeting today, which is to talk about those takeaways. So Emily, could you kindly move that forward for us? Thank you.
Can everyone see my screen? Okay, great. So yes, as Donna said, I did attend the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Sustainable Communities Conference. This is an annual conference that is open to municipalities across Canada, really focusing on, ideas and opportunities to help communities become more sustainable on their path to net zero by 2050, and also had a big focus this year on nature-based solutions. So I just wanted to speak to some of the key takeaways that came from this. This is known, but I thought I would highlight it for those who don't know. Cities are responsible for over 70% of global greenhouse gas emissions, which makes them, a prime space to really work on emissions reduction. We're also on the front lines of climate action because of where our community, the buildings and the vehicles and infrastructure are right in our communities. One of the pillars that was really talked about a lot at this conference was natural asset management and integrating this as a climate solution. So looking at some of the local benefits. So stormwater management, recreation, as well as tourism, flood and freshwater protection, as well as cultural benefits. It spoke to some of the regional benefits as well. So source water protection, air quality, waste management, and a habitat for wildlife, and local, national and global benefits. So as looking at it as a form of carbon sequestration, so climate mitigation, as well as adaptation, biodiversity, and even reconciliation. Another big pillar of this conference was talking a lot about local financing programs and GHG reduction, which is something that we're working on here at the city with a grant application to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities to hopefully conduct a feasibility study on what a community retrofit program would look like here in Sault Ste. Marie. You know, energy and heat, and as well as to cool and power our homes, account for 18% of national GHG emissions. And 75% of today's homes and buildings are going to still be used in 2050, which really helps build the business case for the importance of retrofits. So making our homes and businesses more energy efficient. There were some really great success stories shared from many municipalities who are already working on the implementation of these programs. So we're well beyond feasibility, such as the city of Kingston and the city of Saskatoon. So it was really nice to hear from them because, you know, this is an initiative that's really picking up speed across Canada, and really there's no need to reinvent the wheel. There was also some really great information about parks and resiliency for climate change as well as COVID-19. So I sent along some information to our city's parks department, you know, to take a look at that. Moving on, there was a lot of talk about the value of embedding a climate lens across municipal processes and how this can actually be a strong tool to demonstrate leadership on climate action, but also embedding that need for a cultural shift to ensure that these priorities are embedded across an organization. There was a big focus as well on to achieve Canada's net zero emissions. We have to really look at retrofitting all of our existing homes. And there's going to be a cost here, but there's also an opportunity to really build up that sector within communities across Canada. They presented the Green Municipal Fund, which is the Federation of Canadian Municipalities funding agency, their municipal energy roadmap about cost-effective ways that municipalities can reduce their emissions in buildings, and just again, building on that business case of job creation, but also community well-being. But the piece that I really wanted to highlight as well, and I didn't only see this in the conference, but I've seen it coming across my desk quite a bit lately, is bringing equity as well as reconciliation as part of climate and sustainability work. So, you know, bridging the gap between these two very important sectors. So equity, so looking at things such as affordable housing, energy poverty. So, you know, are people able to pay their energy bills? In turn, would they even be able to look at something like a retrofit? Equity, diversity, and inclusion, they also go hand in hand because sustainability, we're thinking about the future and planning as well. And many new climate action plans are actually now including equity and inclusion lenses to their tasks. So as a call to action to this, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and ICLE, or Local Governments for Sustainability Canada, are developing a toolkit that will actually enable the application of EDI considerations into local climate planning and project implementation. So it'll be really great to see what that toolkit looks like and how we might be able to, you know, embed that across our work in this important portfolio. So I know I breezed through that very quickly. You know, Donna had said now is the time to invite committee members to maybe share any comments or, you know, feedback on things that may, you know, relate to their portfolios or some of these priorities that were addressed. It was a very full 3-day conference, and I do have a lot of material on hand. If anyone would like to review anything specifically in more detail, I'm happy to share the slide decks, etc. But this was just a bit of a takeaway of 3 very chocker block full days of really great information sharing.
Thank you, Emily. May I ask you to, yes, perfect, so I can see everyone. All right, could we go around and get your thoughts? I know we've had this for a few days to sort of soak in. Before we do that, and so if you could be thinking about how you'd like to contribute to this. Emily, was there anything in particular that really stood out for you from the discussions or the comments that seemed to be front and center about what was being worked on, or were there just a lot of great things happening?
Like I said, there was a lot. I tried to summarize it into 2 slides there. For me, I was really focused on listening to other communities and their experiences in developing a community retrofit program. The Federation of Canadian Municipalities, or FCM, has launched a pretty impressive funding stream that will help finance, feasibility, program design, and implementation of these programs. So that was what I was really interested in. And it was great to see, the need for retrofits, a retrofit revolution, if you will, affirmed by a lot of the presenters talking about, the actions needed for Canada to reach its net zero emissions target by 2050.
Okay, cool. Anybody want to jump in first here on your thoughts on these recommendations? Does anything stick out to you? Is anything missing? Anything you want to highlight as extra important? Jamie?
I'll jump in, sure.
Yay, good for you.
Lots of things struck me. I think, first of all, congratulations for getting 3 days in on 2 slides. I think that's impressive, right? And some of the key takeaways are very interesting. I think a few things popped out. Having all homes needing to be retrofitted to meet net zero goals, like that sounds like a monumental task. So even with some financing available, this is a long-term change management play. How do you get people involved and want to change in this way, even if there's some short-term financial incentives? Like my house, for example, I just switched from electrical baseboards to gas in my home, even though it's a higher carbon emissions. It's actually way less expensive. I had $600 heating bills in the winter every month, right? It's way less expensive. It's more even heat. It's more comfortable. So how do you incentivize people to go and retrofit their houses back into something that's maybe more expensive? So that's my first question. I've got more. You want me to let them all out now, or just we'll start there?
Maybe start there.
Okay.
It might be hard to remember it all. So, by no means do I have all of the answers, but it is a monumental task, and there's a lot of things being done at the grassroots level. There's quite a few nonprofits that are lobbying to the government to speak to a national retrofit program, further incentives beyond the Greener Homes Grant. But what I've also seen is you're seeing some things in other industries, specifically utilities, so natural gas. I know Enbridge has had a couple of pilot projects working with communities down in Southern Ontario, where they're looking at adding different fuel sources to the pipeline, specifically hydrogen, to help with offsetting some of the carbon emissions from natural gas. So there's a lot of work to be done, but it's great to see other industries stepping up to the plate. I think it affirms the need for an all hands on deck approach. You can't just, do one thing. And you're right, at present, natural gas is, more affordable. But there's a lot of pieces to that puzzle. But thank you for bringing that forward, Jamie.
Can I jump in 2 seconds so in addition to that, so when we talk about, the first start of the programs for retrofits and getting customers to go electrification or how you get there, I think that's a start. And then you look at policy in terms from the government, in terms of you're starting to see the natural gas prices increase. So that gap between, what it costs you to heat your home electrically and what it costs to heat a home through natural gas is actually going to start getting smaller. And then you have to look at the policy from the electrical side. Well, how do we make it more affordable for customers to afford electrically heat their homes. And that is a big challenge. So that's not a, when we talk about the plan and the days or the years going out, there's some short-term plan there to help you retrofit and do that thing. But the long-term plan is how do you make it from a top-down or policy-down type of scenario to make it more affordable, that you're not switching to natural gas, or you're actually switching back to, to electricity in terms of, for your home. And then obviously there is other programs out there so that you can generate, so that your own generator and storage of that electricity to make it more cost effective. So there is things coming. But yes, today, right now, why would you switch to electricity from natural gas? That's a tough sell, I think.
It's a really interesting discussion. I was hearing a story about a community, I want to say it was in the US somewhere, where the entire community was built. It was a zero emission community. I don't recall the size of it. It wasn't particularly large. And the builder who had built this first, I don't know if anybody else saw this, but the builder who had built this first set of homes, I'm going to guess there was 100 or something like that, in this space, could no longer afford to proceed or something like that. So somebody else is now taking on the building the rest of the subdivision, but they're not applying those continued principles. So whereas these homes were all either solar that powered electric, like completely zero emission homes, really cool. Now it's not being able to be sustained for whatever the reasons are. There's just so much happening in this field, I guess, in this environment. And for people who are at this moment having to look at changing or replacing a furnace or what they want to do at this particular time, it's like, do you wait and try and do something different, or do you have to do what you need to do now and then you can change over in the future? It's complicated, and it's also very expensive, right? So interesting. Who else wants to weigh in on this particular topic of retrofits? Anyone? All right, Jamie, carry on.
Okay, so the second thing that struck me was also the DEI metrics. Of course, energy poverty would be a real challenge, particularly in our community, I think. DEI metrics, or DEI in total, is just a fast moving field. I think there's a lot of businesses and organizations now that are putting together policies and programs towards diversity, equity, inclusion. Have we thought about incorporating any sort of DEI metrics into our greenhouse gas reduction plan? Is there any lens to this?
So I can speak to what I have in the hopper right now. So as part of our hope to be successful in the feasibility study funding, there is an EDI portion to that feasibility study. So it's going to, we have to speak about how this retrofit program is going to take a social lens. Like, what will it do from a social perspective? So pending success on the application, of course, I think that would bring forward some really good insights. When it was developed, there was no EDI lens applied to the GHG reduction plan. I'm not exactly sure where that stands on a corporate level, but as we review and amend the plan and check in and see where we're at, I think that would be a very important thing to consider in progress reports and updates moving forward.
Anyone else with thoughts or comments on that angle, the concern about equity, diversity, and inclusion? Go ahead, Pedro.
Yeah, not so much on, thank you, Donna, not so much on retrofits, but there's data showing, for example, that there are other inequalities when it comes to urban design and planning. For example, data showing there's a differential of close to 70% in tree canopy cover between rich neighborhoods and less affluent neighborhoods. And so we also know that parks and the existence of parks and trees and the possibility of being more involved in nature is tied to other things like mental health, addictions, and other issues like that. So these things are kind of fluid. And so my question or thoughts are how do we move forward with designing a city that becomes more carbon neutral, more resilient, but also more equitable when it comes to parks, tree planting, and all sorts of other infrastructure that go with it as well.
Good point, Pedro. I think it definitely highlights the need to take a look at the things that you have mentioned, but I think also other actions and plans across the municipality as well. So very, very good feedback. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, and I just wanted to jump in here too, I guess, on that topic of the equity, diversity, and inclusion. You're starting to see a lot of the federal, specifically through NRCan programs, where they used to say they would like to see it. You're starting to see them now that you have to show it. You have to have those plans before you can apply for incentives, before you get any of the funding available to you. You're starting to see that these plans have to be in place as part of the submission package. And typically it's if you don't submit it all at once, they just, it goes to the trash, I guess, and they move on. So you're seeing it as a requirement now for a lot of the federal funding programs. I don't see it as much as in the provincial, but you're starting to see it more that it's a requirement for these.
Mark, are you talking about for an entity or a community to apply for or to create their own retrofitting plans? I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. They have to have that scope as part of their plan?
So it's more in general in terms of, so when I look through for, federal programs for, say, the ZVIP, the Zero Emission Vehicle Incentive Program. So when you start to look through those, if I'm applying it on the day-to-day job, I guess you would say, those plans are required. So if PUC services wanted to apply for it, they would have to have a plan to apply for it. So typically anybody, whether it's a municipality or a private business or anybody that wants to apply for this funding, you're starting to see more of the requirement that those plans are included in the application.
Yeah, it's certainly, it's really important. There's no question. Anyone else on that particular segment of things?
And I know I hate to say this, but we could decrease the cost of a building by 25%, because a lot of people who are poor or have limited access also don't drive, yet the 25% of the cost of the building is related to building a parking lot. So when you unbundle them, so a lot of communities, what they're doing is like you can rent an apartment and then you rent the parking spot, or you don't need the parking spot. So what has happened is reduce the cost of providing buildings or providing to people who basically are at the lower end or choose not to drive by 25%. So I think that's the consideration, and there's ways to do that, but I can talk more on that later, but I just wanted to throw that in.
Thanks, Andre. Anyone else on that particular item? I'm gonna throw something in here now relevant to that, and Monday, 4 days ago, I was really thrilled to see that our city council approved to have a bylaw put in place to ban certain kinds of single-use plastics. I think that's a big step for us, but I know that some of the councillors who had concerns, and we had great conversations about it, because we all learned from each other about what we needed to do. And certainly we are going to take those, I know the staff are going to take those things forward when they formulate that bylaw. But, and in my looking at it as part of the motion, you know, I see that there are other communities that are addressing things like this, these efforts that are being undertaken to change how we use certain materials, et cetera. This inclusion and equity is very important as part of that. And so while it was a concern, I know that we're going to be able to work our way around it. Other communities are working their way around that to ensure that, you know, not having plastic grocery bags is not going to disadvantage anyone. You know, so I think we can do all things. And I thank you for bringing that point forward, Jamie. That's great. What else did you have on your list you wanted to point out?
Well, I think that's good for now. I was just curious what the success stories were coming from the other cities, Saskatoon and Kingston. I think you just alluded to them. Was that on funding or?
So they're actually, they were successful in acquiring funding and are now moving forward with the implementation of their community retrofit program. So you're seeing different models. Actually, Mark just sent me a link from the city of Ottawa. Better Homes Ottawa is another program that's underway. So a bigger city, of course, they actually have a nonprofit that they're working with who are going to be helping administer the program. But it's interesting because you see a lot of different stakeholders and actors at the table when it comes to bringing these kinds of programs to fruition. So not only municipalities, but also utilities, you know, who can help with, you know, like Mark can speak to this, of course, their experience in the administration of the Save on Energy programs, you know, is something that, you know, can be brought to this table, but also, you know, nonprofits and, you know, marketing of the projects. I could go on and on, but I do have some really great case studies and I'm definitely using them to help build our application, which I'll speak to more in my staff update later.
Go ahead, Pedro.
Thanks, Donna. Sorry, I don't want to get off topic, but Donna, I wanted just to congratulate you on all the efforts with the microplastics. I think that was huge. I saw some of the concerns that that came up. One of the concerns was that it may cost more in terms of fossil fuels to produce, for example, paper bags than plastic bags. I think these are areas where maybe our committee could perhaps help as well. I know we talked that there's going to be public consultation and a task force. We know plastics is part of an economy of scale, so that may be the case. It may also not be the case. And also, of course, we all know that the issues with plastics have to do with the fact that they don't decompose. They continue to degrade all the way to microplastics, so in very small pieces, all the way to nanoplastics. And we know this is a huge problem environmentally for water, soils, organisms, and human health as well. We're starting to understand that there are links between microplastics and human health. So I think that your bill, if it's essential. That's why cities are moving into this. But it's also important that committees like this one can help go into the literature, into the evidence to determine, you know, that other options or that could go against actually this move to phase out plastics and replace them with alternative sources of sustainable sources of materials that can be used to transport things like we used to have 100 years ago.
Thanks, Pedro. Emily, let's put that on our list for another meeting to talk about, and I'd love to hear from all of you around the table from your expertise about how we could contribute to those solutions there. Very good. Anyone else want to hold on? Everybody's been really talkative here, which is great. Anyone else want to point out something not already mentioned about the summary that Emily put together that you want to bring forward for us to be commenting on or thinking about? No, I don't see. Okay. One thing when I was going through this, I made a few notes, but certainly one thing that I've seen both from the summary of these notes, but also from other, certainly from COP26 and other commentary that's been going around, there seems to be this initiative and effort underway, much needed, in my opinion, that this idea of net zero by 2050 is getting really shrunk down. That 2050 just isn't good enough anymore. And so, how that affects, what we can do individually as municipalities, and how we can ramp up our efforts. Certainly globally, that's what people are talking about. And then I guess the only other thing would be, it's so sad to see what's happening in British Columbia right now. I mean, they're undergoing significant challenges, and those challenges are certainly being pointed to in the media, as related to climate change. So there's a lot around weather, and there's a lot around the notes, about natural asset management, and stormwater management, et cetera, et cetera. These examples are happening all around us. They happened in Germany earlier this year, and so just those couple of things really are sinking in. They're extremely urgent to be working on and working on solutions. All right. All right, Emily, I think we're on to, unless anyone has anything further, I think we're on to agenda item 7. Correct? Yep.
I'm on mute, sorry. Okay, let me just make this, oh, I gotta run through it. Okay, can you see my screen? Okay, great. So now just diving into a quick staff update here. Some of the things that staff has been working on since the last time that we met. So we were happy to announce successfully pre-approved for our application to apply to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities for our community efficiency financing feasibility study. To add to that, it was also approved by council on Monday to go ahead and apply for it. And I'd also like to thank the PUC through Mark for their letter of support for that project. So thank you for that. So our full application preparation is underway. I've had a preliminary meeting with the funder. We've gone through everything with a fine-tooth comb, so definitely understand what the expectations are there. Our estimate for submission would be by mid-December of this year. And based on their fiscal schedules, we would know in April, by the end of March or early April, on our success for that application. And it's estimated that this project would take about 6 months and also include some of the preliminary design efforts as well. Just a final update, the energy literacy webinar series was wrapped up on November 10th. Very successful, in my opinion. We've had over 100 registrants, almost 200 views of the webinars online. This is cumulative. And they're now, on the city website, so people can go and review these, addressing a variety of topics from how energy works in Ontario's energy system works, how your home energy system works, and a deep dive into different types of incentive programs for residential and commercial retrofits. I think this is a really good foundation for our hopes to develop a community retrofit program as well. And as a reminder, the city will be featuring some more information about different energy efficiency programs on its social media, wrapping up its 5 days of energy efficiency campaign. So a nice little project, nice to see it wrap up, and very good feedback from the community on that one. I just wanted to do a summary as well on our Green Initiatives Fund. So the Community Development Green Initiatives Fund that the Environmental Sustainability Committee oversees and makes recommendations. So as a reminder, the total fund was $50,000 for 2021, and we've had 3 applications so far. The John Rose Heat Recovery Retrofit, the Summer Students Green Week, and last month, the Library Thermal Imaging Camera Borrowing Program. So any remaining funds at the end of the year will be allocated towards tree planting. And we have already had some conversation with Public Works and the manager of parks regarding this for next year.
Can I ask a question on that before you move on, Emily? To Pedro's point, if we've got 17,000 and change left going towards trees, is there some opportunity to plant them in areas that are non-affluent neighborhoods, for example, or is that under consideration?
Yes, 100%.
Thanks.
Any other questions on that item? Okay, I'm going to move on. So I have brought this up, I think, in our previous meeting. So I've started working on compiling a bit of a report card status update, if you will, on where we're at as far as the year one actions go with regards to the city's greenhouse gas reduction plan. In the plan, if you'll recall, there are some top priorities for year one that were identified, and there's also been some movement on other priorities identified in the plan. So in order to maintain the momentum of this important portfolio, we're going to be summarizing that, looking at things as well like retrofits, how many have been completed, take a look at some of the efforts that the Environmental Sustainability Committee has been involved in, and also speak to other projects that have been undertaken by different departments and talk about some of the key priorities for 2022, which, rest assured, the feedback that has been collected in this committee will be taken into consideration. So the ETA for this report is hopefully in to January of next year. And yeah. So the other task that is fairly new across this portfolio is to host a climate action speaker event. So we're in the very early and preliminary planning stages of this. We're hoping that it will be dual faceted in its nature to both address key actions, concrete actions that people, both the municipality, businesses, and residents can take to lower their carbon footprint, but also inspire action within and across the greater community of Sault Ste. Marie. So discussions are also underway about approaching businesses that are working on sustainability for both industry and municipalities to pitch what they offer as well, to get some more community action on this. So right now, earmark this for something to think about in the spring of 2022. In the essence of time, I'll ask that if anyone has ideas to please email me those. And once more planning gets underway, we'll be sure to bring this back to the committee for a more robust discussion. But if you have ideas for potential speakers, or features, I think it's important to speak to things that are relevant in a community like Sault Ste. Marie. But this is something that I think will help touch upon the education and awareness pillar of the plan, which is very important as well. So the next update, and this is why you all received a bit of a change in your agenda. You'll have seen possibly on Monday's council meeting, the City Council agreed to sign the city's Race to Zero pledge. For those who may not be familiar, this is a global campaign to really rally leadership and support from not only cities, but businesses, investors for a healthy, resilient, zero carbon recovery, creates decent jobs and unlocks inclusive and sustainable growth. There's different pillars for different sectors. So specifically for us, the City's Race to Zero campaign is for cities by cities, and inspires commitments and actions from around the world to channel best practices and available tools to stay on track to that 1.5 degrees Celsius goal of the Paris Agreement. So there's over 700 cities who have signed on to this pledge. I'm not sure if this stands right now, but at the time that I wrote the report, there were 21 Canadian cities that have signed on. So Thunder Bay being the first that I know of in Northern Ontario, but other cities with similar populations and industries like Hamilton, Guelph, St. Catharines, and Ottawa have also signed on as well. So as far as next steps go, this is a new initiative. We will be submitting the pledge through the campaign to get some more direction on what that reporting would entail, but specifically it speaks to reporting on an annual basis on what you're doing for progress. So this aligns very well with our intention to create a report card and a status update, if you will, on the actions of the greenhouse gas reduction plan. And last but not least, I just thought I would share, again, thank you to all of the committee members for sending in ideas for different links. There's a lot of great information out there. Donna, I haven't forgotten your request to think of a place where we can keep all of this. So bear with me while I sort that out. But I encourage everyone to, take a moment, some really great information out there. Thank you to you all. And I think I'll also just thank Pedro as well for your push about the Race to Zero campaign. You sent me an email there and I really appreciate that. So with that, that is the end of my staff update. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer any of them.
Andre, did you have, Tom's leaving. Okay, I see that. Andre, did you have a question or did you want to have a comment, Andre? No?
Well, I was wondering, I don't have a comment, but I just a question about the funds. There was a program that I thought was interesting when I read this book on the high cost of free parking. Some cities are actually to encourage people to come to work in different ways. We had an incentive to give a lot. They actually pay people $800 a year to not come to work with a car. So as opposed to charging for parking, you pay people not to come to work with a car. So I thought that was interesting way of, because we've decided we won't charge for parking at City Hall. So why don't we, a parking spot's worth what, $2,000, $3,000 a year? It's not free. So anyways, I just thought that was something, if we got extra money, how many people would apply?
I think that sounds like a carrot versus a stick model. Yes.
It's definitely a carrot versus stick model.
Yeah.
I love the stick, but nobody seems to like my stick. So anyways.
Anyone else with any other comments? We're at the end of our agenda. We have a little bit of a shorter meeting today, but we will be getting back together again on December 9th, and we'll be following up on a few things. I just wanted to make mention of on the list of resources that Emily had on the last slide. The first item, it is the way it's titled is a bit misleading, unfortunately, but it is an interview at 38 minutes with the mayor of Halifax, who completely nailed, if you ask me. He was doing that interview from COP26, and he completely nailed everything that we need to be doing as municipalities and cities in terms of environmental sustainability, social equity, how we build homes, et cetera, et cetera. I couldn't have said it better. He just wrapped it all up in a really awesome bow. So if you do get time, it's only 10 minutes long. I'd encourage you to listen to that. Anyone else with any other comments before we adjourn for the day? I see none. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday, and we'll be back together again in a few weeks.
A motion to adjourn, Donna.
And we motion to adjourn. Adjourn. Yeah, I don't know if we really need that, but yes. Okay, let's see hands. Adjourn, time to adjourn.
Do we need a mover and a seconder?
Yes. Andre and Mark, perfect. And thank you, David Helwig, for continuing to attend our meetings and share with the community what we're talking about. See you all in a few weeks. Good night.
Thanks, Donna. Thank you. Good night.
Right.